And now on Sydney Weekend, cheers with Ben Malouf. Thanks to firstvintage.com.au.
Benny, good afternoon. You're in Mudgee, mate. First of all, give us a weather report.
Dan, look, the rain is just sweeping through now. I'm pleased to report I was up here for a wedding yesterday, so I was very glad that it hit today and not yesterday for my friends Caroline and Andrew, who got married up in this beautiful, beautiful part of the country.
What makes Mudgee so special? Everyone talks about Mudgee wines. You're actually staying at a winery, aren't you?
I am. Look, I've been to several wineries over the last couple of days. Interesting question, and I was chatting to a winemaker this morning about just that. And when I was speaking to them, they said, look, there's a couple of factors that really do make Mudgee stand out. First of all, the soils up here in Mudgee are really rich in minerals. They've also got really good drainage, and that's a really good thing for when you're growing grapes and when you're trying to produce good quality wines. The weather also plays a part. They get really cold winters up here in Mudgee, and what that does is it basically shuts down the vines and allows them to rejuvenate and regenerate themselves, much in the same way as, you and I go to bed for the night and you wake up feeling 20 foot tall and bulletproof in the morning.
Is that the way it's supposed to work?
Sorry?
Is that the way it's supposed to work?
It is.
I wish it did.
You've got to sleep more than 3 hours at a time, though, Dan. That's the problem.
Indeed.
But
Indeed.
That, in conjunction with some really innovative winemaking, really makes it a perfect storm for winemaking conditions up here in Mudgee. It's just absolutely fabulous.
So get on up there and spend your money with local winemakers in Mudgee. Okay, I've got some great emails during the week. People really loving this segment. Steve emailed me. He said he received a wine decanter for a wedding present, and it's never been out of the box. And he said the box has never been out of the cupboard. He said, Dan, when should you decant wine or not?
Yeah, look, good question. And you do get that on a semi-regular basis. I guess the best way to answer that question is to identify why you would decant wine. Now, traditionally, there are two reasons why you would decant wine. Number one is to get rid of the sediment that is in the wine. So, when you open an old bottle of wine, there's all what looks like, sort of almost flecks of dirt in the bottom of the bottle.
Yeah, yeah.
Decanting will allow you to remove those. But also what you're doing is you want to aerate your wine. Because by putting air through the wine or across the surface of the wine, what you're doing is you're effectively turbocharging the maturity process. So we've talked regularly about these flavours that come out of wine, and maturing wine allows those flavours just to really come on very strong, and they just, again, burst out of your glass, and it's just a great way to serve your wine. So I would say to Steve, your big, heavy styles of wine, like we spoke about last week, your Cab Savs, your Shirazes, are really well suited to decanting. Not so much with your lighter styles, your Sem Sav Blancs, your Sauvignon Blancs, because they really don't need to develop. They're not those big, heavy wines that we spoke about last week.
Right. And is there any point decanting a $6 bottle of, what do they call them, clean skin from Coles?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And you know what? I'd love Steve to try this week. If he's got a bottle of red wine, particularly a bottle of Cab Sav or Shiraz, I'd love him to pull it out of the cupboard this week, have a little glass, then decant the remainder of the bottle, decant it for about, half an hour, 45 minutes, and then try the wine again. And he really will notice a significant difference. So it'd be great to hear back from him next week and, see what he thought.
Brilliant. Now, Elaine emailed us last week and says, thank you for settling her bet last week about whether you can freeze wine. This week, she wants to know a very important question, Ben. Mm-hmm. What happened to Porphyry Pearl?
Dan?
And I want to add to that, what was Porphyry Pearl?
Dan, I think we are starting to get an indication of this lovely lady's age, and that's not being critical or rude. The Porphyry Pearl was hugely popular back in the 60s. It was a semi-sweet style of wine called Lebensfraumilch. Now, it's a German style, and it was those really sort of sugary, sweet flavours that came through.
Yeah.
So, look, it was one of the very first commercially available styles of wine in Australia back in the 60s. You might remember Blue Nun or...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. So those sweet styles of wine, the Australian wine market has developed, extra strings to their bow. So you still can find those styles of wine around. I don't think you can still buy Porphyry Pearl per se, but you can still find those sweeter, semi-sweet styles of wine out in your shelves. But Australia has an eclectic range of wines these days, made with different methods and in different styles. That just happens to be one of them.
Could you still drink a bottle of Porphyry Pearl that was in the cupboard from those years ago?
Dan, I wouldn't be risking it, personally. But, look, you could give it... Generally not. I would suggest that by this stage, we talked last week about wines that were going to age and wines that aren't going to age. The wines that are big and heavy in tannin and in alcohol, such as your Cab Savs and your Shirazes, they're the ones that are really going to age well. Your white wine styles generally don't age as well. Okay,
the Porphyry Pearl. Pour it down the sink.
I think that's a particularly good idea, Dan.
Benny, thank you very much for your time. Give our regards to Mudgee, and we'll speak again next week.
Fabulous. Speak to you next week. Thanks, Dan.
There's Ben Malouf there with his weekly wine segment, and you can email me and I'll get those questions to Ben. Just dan@2gb.com, and I'll put together a little dossier for Ben when he joins us for his weekly wine segment. Cheers with Ben Malouf.